With all the bad news floating around about Trump's tariffs and their impact on Canada, I may have some good news today for Canadians. Trump's tariffs, whether we become the 51st state or not, may make Canadian stocks great again. I'm going to talk today about something called backdoor exporting. And I want you to understand how that works and why it may negatively impact some countries and positively impact Canada. I'm sure you're going to find this one quite interesting. Let's get started. To understand how backdoor exports work, I want you to see a kind of complicated looking chart brought to us by Rosenberg Research, but don't worry, I've got your backs. I'm going to walk you through how this chart works. It's actually easy to understand once I show you how to read it. This chart shows us on the vertical axis the amount of exports coming from a given country to the United States. The higher up on the grid you are, the more your country is exporting to the United States. Or to put it in the reverse, the higher amount of imports the US receives from that country. The horizontal is the number, or the given relative amount, I should say, of imports into that country that are coming from China. So let me just explain that a little bit better. If we look at Canada, which is right here, we can see that a large percentage of our exports are going to the United States. In fact, we're one of the highest in the entire world as far as the percentage of our GDP that is dependent on exporting to the United States. However, you can see that we are not on the right-hand side of the scale. We are not importing on a relative basis much from China. So let's take another example. Doug Ford recently said that Mexico is a backdoor importer for China. So what does he mean by that? Well, here's Mexico. A lot of their trade, a lot of their exports goes to the United States. That's why they're way up on the vertical scale here. But they're also pretty far to the right on the horizontal scale. What that means is that they also import a lot from China. So what Doug Ford was saying is that Mexico is bringing goods in from China, possibly relabeling them or just filtering right through back to the United States. So they're a backdoor importer for the United States, or a backdoor exporter, you could say, from Mexico. Let's take a look at some specific examples that are the real culprits for these backdoor import policies. You can see far right, way up there for the number of exports they have as a percentage of their economy to the United States is Vietnam. They're also far to the right as far as how much imports they're receiving from China. So it's pretty obvious they're a backdoor importer. Mexico, as we just mentioned, Korea, South Korea that is, and India. They're all in that upper right-hand side, and that's where, as a country, you don't want to be. Specifically, let's look at the worst culprit for backdoor exports. So, and by the way, I'm using exports and imports back and forth here because they're either an importer like the United States or an exporter like Vietnam. The problem with Vietnam is they're an importer from China and they're an exporter to the United States. So here's the situation. Vietnam imports from China have soared 160% since 2018. At the same time, their US-bound exports have grown 190%. It's pretty obvious that Vietnam is bringing stuff in from China and then sending it to the US as a backdoor way of getting merchandise sent over to the United States. Well, say what you will about President Trump, but he and his team are no dummies, and they're not going to tolerate this, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Vietnam is going to be paying some pretty hefty tariffs for this rather backdoor policy. Let's take a look at the chart of the Vietnam ETF. You can see that at this point, it is finding support. It's been falling, but it's found support around $11.50. It's my opinion that if Trump does impose tariffs on Vietnam, you're going to see this chart break down. Now let's take a look at Mexico. You'll recall I said near the beginning of this video that Doug Ford says that Mexico is China's back door for US imports. Well, you can see that the market's already built that threat of tariffs by Trump into Mexico. And you can see the chart is breaking down right now. There's support somewhere around $50 or so, and that is handily broken. And I would target way down here around the $40 level. I don't want to be in Mexican stocks. Hope you don't either. Next, let's take a look at Korea. Well, you'll remember that was another one that was in that top right grid on Rosenberg's chart. Well, you can see that right now, Korea is struggling and in fact, probably breaking down from a vital support level. I don't think that the Korea ETF is going to take too long to get back to its 2022 lows. The last one of our 4 export-import bad boys, backdoor bad boys, let's call them, and that's India. Now, if we go back to Rosenberg's chart, you can see that there's kind of a cluster of countries that are importing a bit from China and exporting to the United States. And Trump isn't going to go after all of these countries full bore anyways for this strategy. I was trying to isolate the 4 most vulnerable countries for this policy, and India is just kind of on the edge. So I don't feel that India is probably going to be a major receiver of tariffs from Trump, but it still should be mentioned because they are in that right-hand side of the grid, and they do a lot of exporting to the United States. So let's take a look at that chart. Here's the Indian ETF that trades on the New York Stock Exchange, INDY, and you can see that India broke out in 2024 from its old 2022 high. That's good news for any chart. And you can see it moved into an uptrend and now it is consolidating. The thing I want to show you though is that India has not yet broken its key support somewhere in this ETF's case around $50. So my thoughts are that if India is not hit too hard with the tariffs, then it should find support at this $50 or so and remain above that line. However, there is that chance, given where it is on Rosenberg's grid of exports and imports from China, there is a chance that this stock, or at least this chart, I should say, could break down. So we should be cautious on Indian ETFs and India stocks as well. Keep that in mind. Even if it's the least vulnerable of my backdoor 4, it's still in the grid and in the place that you don't want to see if you're an investor. Final chart. I did say there's good news for Canadian investors. Trump may help Canadian stocks be great again. Canada does export a lot of goods to the United States. In fact, a big chunk of our economy is reliant on US consumerism. However, we don't import on a relative basis a lot from China, and we are not a backdoor exporter. We are exporting our own goods and services, which include oil and gas, timber, and whatnot, to the United States, and we are a good partner. And Trump's team recognizes this. What he's interested in is, will we clean up our border? So he is less interested in penalizing us for bringing stuff over from China, rebranding it and sending it their way. He is more interested in if we meet our border control objectives, which, by the way, we should have met anyways, bad on us for not doing so. If we meet that, I think we're going to see that Canada and the United States are going to return to a very firm and solid relationship. So when we look at the chart, we can see that even with the recent pullback on the TSX, it's still above its last low. The TSX is still in an uptrend. Could it fall a bit more? Absolutely. If I reverse this a little bit, we can see that the last low was around 24,000. It's around 24.4 or something like that right now, 24.5. Could it pull back another 400 or 500 points? Sure it could. And that would still be at technical support on the chart. So I am less doomsday on the Canadian stock market than I am for any of the 4 backdoor bandits that we just took a look at. I'm more positive for Canada's future than I am for a lot of countries these days. I hope this video has given you an understanding of the countries that will be most impacted by Trump's tariffs. I also hope that it helps you understand how Canada is actually not going to be as greatly impacted as many of the headlines are telling you. Well, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more videos. And don't forget, like and subscribe, share the love. Thanks for watching.